As we told you at the top of the program, administration officials were up on Capitol Hill this afternoon pushing President Obama's plan for limited strikes on Syria. Pushing that at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio was on that panel. He joins us live tonight. Senator, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Bret.
Senator Corker just came out a few moments ago saying there could be a draft resolution tonight and possibly even a vote tomorrow. Knowing what you know and after this hearing today, how would you vote?
Well, first of all, let me say that this Syrian situation is a mess because of the president's actions leading up to this point. You know, this conflict's been going on for more than 2 years. There was a time early on when Assad was literally on the ropes, and the U.S. should have engaged in identifying moderate rebels and helping the Syrian people get rid of them themselves. But he led from behind. And now, you know, Islamists have poured into Syria, and we really have very few good options available to us at this point. So your question is how I would vote on the resolution. Let's understand what the resolution is. First of all, it's for military action. I don't believe we should take military action unless we have a clear and achievable goal in mind. And one of the clear goals of this action that he's arguing for is to impede Assad from using chemical weapons in the future. I am highly skeptical. Now, we have a closed hearing tomorrow where classified information will be discussed, and I'll wait until then to reserve judgment. But I remain very skeptical that the kind of attack that they're contemplating, this limited attack, is going to actually achieve that goal of preventing Assad from using chemical weapons in the future. The reason why he's using those weapons now, according to John Kerry, he said this today, is number one, because he doesn't think Obama will do anything about it, but number two, because he wants to survive. And I'm not sure that he's going to be deterred from using chemical weapons in the future in order to hold on to power simply because he's afraid of 2 or 3 days worth of missile strikes.
So you don't think potentially it goes far enough? You'd like to see something bigger, broader?
Well, the problem with it, and that's why I go back to the point that we have very few good options available to us, in fact, we have no good options, is there are problems associated with a bigger strike. For example, if Assad were removed from power today immediately, the likeliest outcome would be a new civil war in which Islamists would fight moderate rebels. You could see sectarian violence and sectarian and ethnic cleansing. You could see Alawites and Christians and others being attacked. All of this, of course, the result of the fact that for 2 years the president led from behind. You know, many of these radical Islamists, they're foreign fighters. They're not even Syrians. They poured into the country because rebels were unable to consolidate power and a hold of significant portions of the country because they weren't organized and didn't have the capability to do it, something that could have been avoided.
Senator, I understand your point about not being to this point because of actions of the administration and your criticism of that in the past, but we are where we are now.
Yes.
So if it's President Rubio, what are you doing?
Well, first of all, again, I think that we have to outline what should have been done because that's important. We have to understand if I had been in charge or someone else, hopefully, we would never have gotten to this stage. So if we inherited this mess which we have now, I think our obligation is to try to figure out what is the least worst option available to us because they're all bad. And part of that equation, I can't tell you right now until we go through that intelligence briefing tomorrow. Because one of the key questions we have to ask ourselves is who are these so-called moderate rebels on the ground in Syria, and are they even capable of taking control of the country and giving us a rational, secular, stable government?
Yeah,
that's a key question.
Here's what you said about it back in February at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy about Syria and the rebels in particular. Quote, "The problem we have is that the best organized, best armed, and best equipped elements in Syria are the most radical ones, the most anti-democratic ones, the most anti-American ones.
Right.
There's the real risk that when Assad falls, and he will fall, the largest, most well-equipped, best organized groups in that conflict will be the people who, quite frankly, are against our national interest." Do you still believe all of that today?
Well, listen, here's the thing. Secretary Kerry and others are arguing that those circumstances may have changed. So we want to go through those closed briefings to figure out if that the evidence actually supports that. But that's a concern I continue to share, that these Islamist elements, particularly consolidated in the north and east part of Syria, are still the best organized and best trained and, quite frankly, the best effective fighting force on the ground. That is not in our national interest, but that may be the reality of the president's inaction. We'll learn more about that tomorrow, hopefully.
Yeah, and what you've seen so far, is there any doubt in your mind that it was, in fact, the Assad regime that launched chemical weapons against its own people?
Well, I believe that it was the Assad regime. Actually, and that's the assessment of our intelligence community as well. I haven't seen credible information that proves otherwise. I believe it was the Assad regime that carried out this chemical attack. The question now for us, of course, what can we do in response to it? And of course, unfortunately, I think the president has left us with very few options here because of his inaction for over 2 years.
One of the things Secretary Kerry was pressed on today in that hearing in which you were a questioner was about the boots on the ground possibility. And at one point, he did say that he didn't want to take off the table an option if chemical weapons fell into the hands of al-Qaeda or some other group that would be against U.S. interests. What about that answer, and
well,
what did you take from it?
First of all, I think there's zero support in the Congress for engaging U.S. military troops on the ground as a response to the chemical attack. I think aside from that, as part of speculation, I think irrespective of this whole debate here about this resolution, if at any point in time we felt that either the Syrian regime was transferring these weapons to Islamists like Hezbollah or Iran, or if we felt that somehow these might be falling into the hands of rebel forces that could use it against American forces and our allies, I think the President would always have the ability to react quickly in an emergent situation of that category in order to prevent that from happening. But I think that is separate and apart from the debate about whether boots on the ground, as they say, whether ground forces should be engaged in an operation right now.
Yeah,
and I don't think there's any support for that.
A fellow senator on that panel today, Senator Rand Paul, said this in his questioning, suggesting it could make things worse if the U.S. acts. Take a listen.
Will Israel be more likely to suffer an attack on them, a gas attack or otherwise, or less likely? I think there's a valid argument for saying they'll be more likely to suffer an attack if we do this. Iran, more likely or less likely to be involved with this? If Iran gets involved, more likely or less likely that Israel launches a reprisal attack on Iran? There are all kinds of unknowns that I can't tell you absolutely the answer, and neither can you.
What do you make of that line of question?
First, I think there's two separate points here. Number one is, should the U.S. have acted in the past? And the answer is absolutely. The fact, not militarily, but if we had gotten engaged early in this conflict in identifying elements that of rebels who were moderates, and we could have worked with them, that would have prevented these Islamists from coming in. It would have given us many more options now. I think not getting involved, disengaging from this conflict early on, has created the mess that we're in now. The fundamental question we face now is it too late? Has the time for that sort of action now passed? Is the outcome we want, which is the replacement of Assad with a moderate, stable government, has the time for that passed? And I think that's a fair question, given the mistakes that have been made up to this point.
Senator Rubio, thank you for your time. I would love to have you back.
Thank you, Bret.